If you fly RC aircraft in the United States, then you know that you're expected to maintain visual line of sight with your aircraft at all times. That means you're not supposed to fly behind a building, behind a tree, behind a mountain, or out of view. You're not supposed to fly beyond visual line of sight, long range. In fact, you're technically not even supposed to put FPV goggles over your face, but all of us FPV pilots will just kind of wink and look the other way and say, yeah, I've got a spotter right next to me, just out of view. But you may be excited to hear some good news coming from the FAA. The FAA has just announced that they are going to be putting out a notice of proposed rulemaking. They're going to be allowing for beyond visual line of sight flying, BVLOS. And I'm here to tell you that if you think it's good news, as usual, the FAA has screwed it up and made it awful. And my guest, Dave Messina from the FPV Freedom Coalition, is here to tell us about all of the ins and outs of why it's awful. Dave, and maybe any upsides of this? Or is it just all awful? I don't want to bury the lead, Dave. I don't want to spoil the ending.
They don't talk about network remote ID.
Oh, so what you're saying is it could be much worse.
It could be worse. There are a couple of things that could be worse, but not by much.
So a lot of times, Dave, when looking at FAA regulations, like an FAA regulation comes down and like there are many parts of it that hobbyists look at and go, I kind of don't like that. But then there are a couple little nuggets in there that we are like, oh, well, hey, we won. You know, it's like one step forward and 3 steps back, but we did get that one step forward. And by the way, I have to say that you personally and your organization, the FPV Freedom Coalition, are directly responsible for many of those little things that we did get. Credit where credit's due, although you're a humble man. You're out there fighting for these things on a daily basis.
We are, and there are a couple of elements that are in here. Shielded operations is one that we introduced to the FAA. The other is BVLOS, Beyond Visual Line of Sight, for recreational operators. That was in the 2021 Beyond Visual Line of Sight Aviation Rulemaking Committee. There was no consideration for recreation. So that's good. That's positive.
So the original idea, and the FAA always does this, they come down and they say, okay, beyond visual line of sight, we need drones, RC aircraft, small UAS to be able to fly where someone doesn't have eyes on them. And as usual, they think about it from the perspective of the big corporations and the big lobbyists and the big money who come in and say, we're going to have delivery drones and we're going to have air taxis. And all of these guys have a lot of money to throw at the problem. They have the ability to do certain things that hobbyists can't do because we're just like one dude standing in a field flying a drone. And when it comes to RC flight, there is a distinction between recreational flight and Part 107 commercial flight, and recreational people can have less restrictions. It sounds like you're saying that we got that. Well, we didn't get anything because this is just a notice of proposed rulemaking. There's no rule yet. But in this sort of proposed rule, there is a carve-out for hobbyists. That sounds like a good thing, Dave. But every time I've talked to you about this, you seem pretty negative. Why?
Well, it's a good thing. We can fly recreationally for 10 nautical miles from a center point. So a radius
I love it.
of 10. So that's so good. So that's
10
good.
nautical. I'm going to get my drone right now. I'm going to go out. I'm going to fly 10 nautical miles. I'm going to be legal. This is good.
Well, not so fast.
Okay.
We also can fly less than 55 pounds, so that's consistent with small UAS. Check.
Absolutely.
That's good.
I was already doing that.
We have to be standard remote ID. So broadcast modules, it doesn't look like it. You also have to fly.
So wait, standard remote ID basically is inaccessible on self-built drones.
Yes, correct.
It
has to be integrated.
So, and that means you have to be flying essentially a DJI style drone. I say that because these days you can't get DJI drones in the United States anyway, but that's a separate issue.
Right.
So self-built drones not eligible for BVLOS under this ruling.
Right. Largely, you could create your own remote ID system. It has to be integrated, and then you could get that approved by the FAA. Very, very difficult, very expensive.
I could have brushed my teeth twice every day for the last 6 months, but we all know I didn't.
Yes. And there's also, you have to fly in very low density, low population density. They have to set up new categories. And there are a number of things that we don't have to do that are part of 108. You don't have to create a company operation. You don't have to have manuals. There's no experience requirement. The experience requirement is 5 hours, which to us is pretty comical. You don't have to have a base of operations. You don't have to have an operations supervisor, but you still have to maintain the responsibilities. And you don't have to have a plan or an implementation of cybersecurity, and you don't have to think about a duty cycle. So you don't have to have N number of hours that you can fly a week max.
Okay, so hang on. You said 108, and I'm going to infer from context that 108 is the commercial rules for beyond visual line of sight flying. Just like 107.
It also incorporates recreational. So there are multiple aspects of Part 108. It is, and there are various permits and certificates underneath under 108.
So new terminology that RC pilots have to learn is just like Part 107 is commercial operations. Structure. Part 108 is BVLOS operations.
Correct. And you can fly 107 in conjunction with 108 simultaneously.
They're not exclusive. Yeah.
Right. Those were the good news.
Yeah, those are the things that all the non-hobbyists have to do to fly BVLOS, the Amazons and the UPSs of the world. Although also just anybody like a real estate photographer wants to fly BVLOS. He's got to do all those things you listed, even though that's not recreational, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And so if we stay on recreational for a moment, the recreational operator needs to identify as an operator, needs to provide the explicit responsibilities of an operations supervisor and flight coordinator, which is detailed in the NPRM.
Okay.
You also have to have strategic deconfliction, which means you have to have a device that handles DAA, detect and avoid. That is material. So so it can't be ADS-B.
So hang on. There has to be a device. It's not just visual see and avoid. I see a helicopter coming my way. That's what we do now. We're responsible for maintaining visual separation. We have to have a device. And my first thought is some kind of ADS-B device that's going to detect airplanes in the air and tell me they're coming. But you're telling me it's not ADS-B.
Because the FAA has declared that ADS-B is not allowed to be used for UAS. So can't use it. You have to come up with something else.
Well, hang on. I don't want to get too in the weeds here, but I can't put ADS-B on my SUAS, but I can still use ADS-B to detect incoming traffic and avoid it. But that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about the SUAS has to have some kind of broadcast mechanism to allow other entities to detect it. Is that what you're saying?
So as we think about it, it's like, wow, that sounded great with recreational, but unfortunately there are a couple of gotchas, as there always are. And the two areas that are big are strategic deconfliction and conformance monitoring. And these are capabilities that are not yet invented or in the market. So this is from a perspective of timing. This is a long time. This is years. So strategic deconfliction is detect and avoid. So as an aircraft, as a UAS flying along, you need to be able to detect other UAS as well as manned aircraft. So you figure, well, manned aircraft are required to squawk ADS-B. Great. If I have an ADS-B in capability on my UAS, that's good for manned aircraft. Now I have to figure out a new technology to detect UAS as I'm flying along my BVLOS flight path. The next one, conformance monitoring, is trickier. I have to have real-time reporting that can be reported up to the FAA, and that's of all along the flight path. They want to see all aircraft that are in the vicinity. That's definitely new technology when you think about reporting a data stream in real time throughout the flight path. Then there's a whole area of record keeping and reports. And you mentioned earlier the idea that frequently the FAA will focus on enterprise capabilities. They did that to the extreme in this document. Small and mid-sized companies are almost given no consideration, and the same for recreational. So the focus is a very large company that has a large budget that can handle record keeping and reports.
Hmm.
So some of the details, just real quickly on record keeping, flight data, any interruption report, any momentary failure. You have to ID all parts in the system that are failed. We have to report an automated data service provider failure. So we're being required to buy a service from an organization that's going to provide us conformance monitoring. If they have an outage, the operator is required to report it. That to me is not appropriate. Report all security breach where the operator loses control, damage property greater than $500. They say it's different from Part 107. I can't find how it's different. So it's a redundant reporting because we're operating under two parts. So you'd have to report for 108 and 107, registration, serial number. Then on record keeping, for each UAV, every month we have to send forward total time in service, status of lifetime limited parts, records of each flight, time, date, duration, flight, origin, altitude.
Hang on. There are two things that I'm feeling as you start listing these things off. And one is that the sheer amount of BS that even a recreational BVLOS operator would be expected to comply with is impossible. Just impossible. Right? Like
I think it's really close to impossible. Yes.
Right now, recreational FPV flight, legal recreational FPV flight is feasible. Now, the FAA asks for a lot of things that a lot of people, including myself, think are stupid, ineffective, unnecessary, overreaching, and frankly, a lot of people just don't comply. But if you wanted to comply, you could with some effort. And it sounds like in this case with BVLOS, that isn't true anymore.
I agree.
It's just not feasible.
You would have to have a significant part of your work week would need to be dedicated to reporting and record keeping.
Mm-hmm.
One of my longtime friends was an F-18 pilot, and he talked about the ratio of time on the ground versus time in the air, preparation as well as debrief.
Yep.
It's when you're flying an F-18, you would hope that there's a fair amount of briefing and pre and post briefing
and maintenance.
And maintenance.
And Dave, I would hope, and I assume it's the case, that every time anything out of the ordinary happens mechanically in terms of maintenance on an F-18, that there is a paper trail of exactly which part failed and why it failed and how often it fails.
Right.
And it sounds like that's the model the FAA is trying to apply to these BVLOS drones. And okay, I don't want drones dropping out of the sky onto people's heads. I guess that makes sense. I don't know what kind of a world we would live in where, but
yeah, so
I don't have the answer, but the answer is not this NPRM.
There are a couple of things that are really distressing. One is that the FAA has not embraced the idea that the majority of pilots of UAS in the United States are in small, mid-size, or recreational. So small and mid-sized companies or recreational by an order of magnitude, at least, to enterprise pilots. But this document is targeted to enterprise. The second thing that's really troubling is again and again and again in the document, in addition to abdicating responsibility and putting the onus on the operator or the manufacturer, there's a phrasing that's consistent which says all or every. They strive for absolutes. And so they want equipment that that never fails when it is struck by a lightning.
That was the one. I'm glad you brought that up, because in terms of, let's say you've got a hobbyist and the hobbyist says, I'm going to do all the things just to prove that I can. And they try to do it and they write all the reports. One of the requirements is that the drone the SUAS has to continue to operate if struck by lightning.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So we talked about it in the FPVFC, and I talked to Alex about it. And so we figured, well, for the larger UAS, you could create a Faraday cage that is a wired structure that's charged that can protect electronics inside. We cannot see how that can be reproduced for motors.
Yeah.
So We just struggle that this was written, but there it is, and it's an
Yeah.
absolute. You must, and it's C2 as well as flight control. So, and that's another point that I've mentioned offhand there, is that all aircraft are essentially autonomous. So there is no notion of a pilot flying these aircraft. And so you have to have an aircraft that is fully autonomous, and
So-
that includes waypoints and
Yeah.
flight path.
So the world in which I'm a fixed wing RC pilot who likes to fly FPV in the 5 to 10 kilometer range just for fun, mountain surfing, for example. I'm flying over an unpopulated mountain range, and I just like to fly between the peaks, right, and have beautiful views. And I'm in control of the aircraft the whole time, right? It's not an autonomous. That's not possible under this NPRM.
It's possible, but it would have to be an augmentation. You would have to have the self-flying capability in addition to
Yeah.
fully autonomous.
Yeah, yeah.
So
You
can see this is getting physically
Yeah.
large. This aircraft is getting larger and larger and larger.
And I, Dave, we could spend 40 minutes diving into all of the BS details of the things the FAA asks for that are overreaching, unnecessary, maybe, or at the very least impossible to comply with for any except the very largest corporations. But I think that point is made. The other piece that really stood out to me is how much of this where they kind of say, and then something will spring into existence whole cloth, like Athena from Zeus's head. I don't know. They don't really do their job of writing regulations. They just say, and then it'll be the way it needs to be. Someone will do it, right? There's a lot of sort of aspirational aspects to this, which means that we can't even comment on how it's going to be because we don't know. They just say that someone's going to do it.
Exactly. And in the areas of airworthiness acceptance. So if you've been following what type cert means the official blessing, approval of an airframe. That's new and different for Part 108. Part 146, which is unmanned traffic management, the content of the record, the reporting, and the record keeping. So how do you figure that out? What exactly needs to be reported, etc. Cybersecurity policies and plans. All of those aspects are under the heading of what you described. Usually we're going to look to a standards body to volunteer, create the standard, create then a means of compliance that the FAA would approve. Then it's up to a manufacturer or an operator to create a declaration of compliance and get approval. So this is why I add up all of these pieces, and it's about 10 years that I would estimate before we're going to have BVLOS. And so when I say it feels like an abdication,
yes,
that's the point I'm trying to make.
It would be like if it was my job as an engineer to design a car, and I came back to my boss and I said, I designed the car. I hand him a sheet of paper and it says, hire an engineer to design a car. And then I cash my paycheck. I mean, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but there are many parts of this that's exactly what they did.
You're not too far off. And the one that really disturbs me along those lines is Part 146, the unmanned traffic management. Now, I have empathy for the people who authored this. There were 3 people apparently that authored it. They're on LinkedIn. They're very proud and pleased of the work they've done, rightfully so. They spend about over 100 pages essentially writing an RFQ, a request for quote. So there's very little requirements in the document. Then the requirements might come to us via 2 advisory circulars, one on strategic deconfliction, the other on conformance monitoring. So the heart and soul of UTM is not in this NPRM. It's work to be done later by a standards organization, which will go through a means of compliance, etc. So hasn't been started, it sounds like, and will take quite some time. Now, we do know that NASA has been working on UTM for over 10 years. ASTM has been working on UTM for years, and RCTA, the other very large international standards body. So those efforts, and they're enormous efforts, were not mentioned in this document. So the best recommendation I could have for Part 146 is start over, because in my background, working in global tech, the architecture and the means that they're describing are obsolete at least 20 years ago.
What you're saying is they acknowledge that for BVLOS to work, you need traffic management. You need the ability of, you're going to have a huge number of aircraft in the air, far more than now. And we need a way for them to sense and avoid each other and not crash into each other.
Yes.
And the FAA, and people have been working on this problem for 20 years, you say. And the FAA said, you know what? You guys, somebody needs to start working on this, but they didn't actually reference any of this. They didn't say, and we will use this existing work, or we will build on this existing work. They were just like, I don't know, guys, start from scratch. And it's like,
Right.
well,
And
okay, you're immediately 20 years behind the curve.
And what they did spend time on was talking about how to develop the software, manage updates, how to handle procurement ideas. So in those 100+ pages, that's where they have absolutely obsolete ideas. And so I retired in 2018. So I checked with a couple of friends, and they're like, "Oh yeah, this won't work. This will not work today."
And it's tricky because, when you write a regulation, I feel bad. I'm sympathizing with the FAA a little bit, but I've been a guy who has to write a requirements document, right? And there's always a point where if you make it too specific, you're making a mistake. Like you're going to write enough of a requirement that you get what you want, but not so much of a requirement that you hamstring the actual people who have to implement it. So like, just because there are some parts of it where they were like, hey, we're not going to nail this down right now, isn't inherently a problem, but the extent to which they did it.
Right.
And in fact, in some cases, it may not even be legal. Well, we're not lawyers, but...
Well, that's what has me very concerned with respect to releasing the requirements via advisory circulars that is here, as well as in the TSA work, is that they could be working around the statute of rulemaking, which means that you're supposed to have public comment about it.
You release the proposed rule, and this is a law, that the federal regulations have to be released as a proposed rule. Then there's a comment period, and then they ignore the comments and do whatever they were going to do anyway. Wait, no, that's not how the law is written. That's just what actually happens. But in my observation, that's not true. Comments have had effect at sometimes.
But it is a law, and that so this is criminal, not civil. So good luck getting that to the top of the list of things the Justice Department is interested in. Yeah.
Looking forward to
Part
that.
146 to me floats to the top of the list. If you were saying, well, what's the worst? What's really concerns you the most about this entire document? It would be unmanned traffic management.
Yeah.
So, and the way we were describing it earlier, and so if you're a software developer and you want to hear about, well, who's the customer? And what are the demographics of that the customer is going to operate in, and what's the market requirements, and what are the product objectives? Those are not discussed in the NPRM. What's discussed is, let's talk about change management and release of code and quality assurance and procurement. So things that I would characterize as boilerplate in a supplier agreement from an OEM to a supplier of software.
Right.
No product requirements.
Right. No actual requirements for like what it needs to be done is what you're saying.
Right. There's a little tiny bit of it in general terms in the preamble, but nothing specific.
Right. So we say, okay, when we buy the trucks, here's how we're going to pay for them. Here's how we're going to document it. Here's how we're going to track it. But not what truck are we buying? How many horsepower should it have? What should its tow capacity be? That's not in there. You're saying they left out a lot of the salient details and focused on this boilerplate stuff.
Where is this truck going to operate? How big is it? What sort of roads is it going to drive on?
Right. Okay, Dave, there is a lot that we could go into here. And you have a document. FPV Freedom Coalition has a document prepared. I'm going to link to that down in the video description below. It'll have more information about your position on it, more specific things that you would like to be different, and an overview of it. But for me, the takeaway is that as a as anyone except an Amazon or a UPS or a big corporation of the world, this doesn't really change my daily life because it doesn't enable me to do something legally that I couldn't do before, practically speaking.
Right. And it's very frustrating that it doesn't change our life because we know that recreational operators have been a huge source of innovation for the industry. So this effectively cuts us out.
Yes.
And that's not smart. It's not smart from an education perspective, education in higher learning with engineers and coders or technicians in airframe and power maintenance. So not smart.
Yeah. I think we're really in a killing the goose that laid the golden egg situation here, where for years and years and years, so much innovation and so much talent has come out of the hobby market. I can't tell you how many people who I came up with as hobbyists, just walking around, having a good time, flying drones, building drones, who now are finding professional, sometimes at extremely high levels, and you'll walk into, again, I'll just keep saying Amazon or UPS, although I haven't dealt with those companies specifically. But hypothetically, you walk into Amazon to their drone headquarters and, oh, there's FPV so-and-so who was flying, 10 years ago. And this bed of talent and bed of innovation is just being absolutely destroyed.
Right. Yeah, Google Wing is a great example of that. Some of the absolute smartest engineers I have ever met work at Google Wing. Most of them flew RC planes and drones as kids.
Yeah,
and they're still kids, but when they were very young.
I think there's people who would say it's fine. That innovation will just move into the corporate space or the government space or the military space. But anybody who has had any interaction with those fields knows that there's no substitute for a freaking 17-year-old in his garage with a fire in his heart and daddy's credit card to do innovation that you will not get out of a $1 million budget from Google. You'll get a different kind of innovation from Google and NVIDIA. It's good, but you really need the sort of hobbyists.
Yes. A simple example is a long-distance flight. So when we talk about long-distance flight, the quickly we hear, can I do 2 watts? Can I have how much can I increase the power for a video transmitter? Mm-hmm. Well, very long distance can happen under very low power. So you have to be clever. You have to understand antennas. That's really great technical information and innovation. That's an area where hobbyists can really help because some of it's science, a lot of it's math, some of it's art as well. So we do have a call to action that we'd like for folks. As you said, on our website, we have the narrative. And as you have said many times, Joshua, this is not a report to Congress, so copy and paste doesn't work here. We need, and we're asking folks to comment, it has to be a unique set of comments. So we will
what they've done in the past, if I understand correctly, Dave, is if people send in 10,000 people, not just one dude spamming, 10,000 people copy the boilerplate, they submit the boilerplate, and then the FAA goes, that's one comment.
Exactly.
They just collapse it down,
right? And that's how they work.
AI to do it now
with an NPRM. So it's really great if you have, this will impact me in this way. If you can state that has huge power in these comments. So what's the impact and what's the benefit for you if this were to change? And so on our website, we will put our comments, which will be pages of narrative that you can quickly read through, and then we will add the instructions. Where's the website that you load up your comments? And we ask that you be professional and polite, constructive, and as I said, include examples and how it impacts you or what the benefit is.
Dave, I have there's a part of me that says, hey, I've been around this rodeo before. I've been around this dance floor before. I don't know the right analogy. When Remote ID was coming out, we wrote comments, yada yada yada. Remote ID is here. Oh look, it happened, and I know that you're in the trenches. You're in meetings with folks in the FAA and legislators, and you're doing as much groundwork to make a difference as anybody. What do you say to people who are like, why would I bother leaving a comment? It's just going to happen anyway. It's going to be terrible, and I'm just going to keep doing what I do.
Yeah, it's a really great question. Right now, people need to be engaged in what's going on in our government. In this area, where you and I have not talked about general politics on this call. This is an area where we, in our hobby, can get engaged. The FAA is sending out a document where they're asking for comments, and they're asking for comments from the public and from manufacturers. And if there's, it is our responsibility to comment and work to seek change. That's the way the process works, even if it's pushing rope a lot of the time.
Yeah.
With the remote ID example, as we've all said, we totaled 53,000 comments, 10 times more than the FAA has ever received. There were dramatic changes from the NPRM, or the Notice for Public Rulemaking, to the final rule. And we can credit the massive amount of comments that were made. And so I anticipate that there will be a lot of comments about Part 146 against this NPRM. And as I said, I empathize with the authors. They were given marching orders on what to do, and they did the best they could. That said, it's a piece of work that I think has to be started over.
Yeah, that's the thing that I wondered if you were going to say. I admit that was a little bit of a leading question, because I know I've spoken with you in the past about things that were in the original remote ID rules that did in fact get rolled back as a result of the comments. And it's easy to look at the remote ID rules that we have now and how completely intolerable they are, and how, like I've said, pointless, overreaching, etc., ineffective, and go, well, we lost. And in fact, we didn't get what we would have liked to have gotten, but we got something better than we would have gotten.
We didn't have network remote ID. We don't have to have a cell phone on every quad that we have in the sky.
Yeah. So, we fight the fight on many levels, I would say. I would say that, we let our voice be heard. And, if you're one of those people out there who says, well, screw it, I'm just going to do what I do. I don't care about the regulations. No one's going to catch me anyway, which there are a lot of people out there. Still, leave a comment, right? And then just do what you were going to do anyway, right? But if you're one of the people who is under some obligation to fly legally because of whatever reasons you personally have decided that's the case, then obviously your motivation is more self-interested. Where does this go next, Dave? I mean, not just not just the NPRM. Like, the NPRM goes through in some form or another. There's BVLOS. What's the next thing that we're going to see? We got remote ID and we all kind of settled in and we're like, okay, this is our new world. I'm going to get and then and BVLOS comes down. It's like, oh boy, here we are again. What's coming after this? What's the next thing I'm going to hate that the FAA is going to do to me?
I think it's going to be components that are mentioned here. I think it's the UTM, the unmanned traffic management, is going to be a nightmare, and conformance monitoring and strategic deconfliction. One aspect that was mentioned in this document, which blows my mind, is a Lance-like capability. So flight authorization has to be granted before the flight, just like in controlled airspace.
Mm-hmm.
In 108, They don't want to use Lance. Lance is a working, running system, but they don't want to use it. So we're going to have to create something else again. So I would assert that a Part 108 Lance and I think this is going to be phased in that much of BVLOS is possible in Class G. So we're going to see a phasing of this activity, and there's going to be in only Class G airspace, and that's going to consume a tremendous amount of time.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
and then we'll work, and then we're also working on Remote ID version 2.
Oh boy.
Which of course Congress has mandated will include network, and so that's part of the standard that we're working on.
I've heard And of course, you hear a lot of things, but I've heard people say that the network remote ID, in other words, your drone has like a cell modem on it or something, and it's reporting its location and other information, not just by broadcasting it out, but literally by sending it to a cell tower or some other means, like God knows how you're going to do it if you're somewhere remote. Those are all problems that the FAA will just say, someone will solve this. Ding, green,
Right.
I've heard that that's coming for
Yes.
all drones, including recreational, that's where the FAA wants to go. And I guess I would expect that probably sooner or later it will go that way.
Yeah, it was mandated no fewer than 5 times in the 2024 FAA Reauthorization Act. So
Yeah.
it is a mandate to the FAA to get going on network remote ID.
So
And
that's
that will
coming.
be an element of the UTM, even though it was not discussed in this document.
Dave, how many pages were in this NPRM that you read through and summarized for us?
767
So since that came out, how long ago did it come out?
last Wednesday.
It came out last Wednesday. That was basically a week ago. It was exactly a week ago. You have read 700 plus pages of extremely technical rules and summarized them, pulled out the nuggets, told us what we need to know about them. And your paycheck for this is, you're a volunteer.
That's right.
Yes, that's right. Somehow or another, you find the time to do that. And I only point that out because FPV Freedom Coalition does take donations, although it doesn't use them to pay you for your work. And so if people do want to join membership with the FPV Freedom Coalition, I highly encourage it. There's links in the video description to your website. And there are people, I don't agree with this take, but there are people who say, you know what? Why would I join the FPV Freedom Coalition? They didn't do anything for me anyway. We still have remote ID. They expect to, and I'm like, look, if the only thing they do for you is summarize the shit sandwich you're about to eat so you know what it's going to taste like before it hits your tongue, that would still be worth a donation. Although I believe you do a lot more than that.
Thank you. We appreciate it. We utilize our membership funding for equipment as well as travel, and we've been going to a number of FAA events and symposia, and so we've gotten in front of and we've connected with FAA and industry folks, and that has allowed us to be more effective in the governmental affairs. So. This year, we did not go to an RC event, which is fun, and it's great to meet folks and listen and help kids. But what we did do is we went to 3 industry events, one in Houston and 2 in the D.C. area.
Yeah, there's no substitute for being in the room. That's
Exactly.
just a fact.
Yep.
You get somebody face to face and you can talk to them and they can hear you and you can hear them in a way that just does not happen any other way. So,
Yep.
All right. Well, links to the FPV Freedom Coalition website, how you can join up and donate, and the document that you're preparing about BVLOS ruling, summary of the ruling, and a call to action about, what you can do to try to get your voice heard. All linked in the video description below. Dave, always a pleasure to talk to you. You're welcome back anytime.
Same here. Thank you, Joshua.
All right.